Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So today I'm going to show you how I've made this shaker card using products from Crafts. And the key feature is this embossed acetate, which I've done using the cover plate die. I think it just really adds another dimension to shaker cards, and so let me show you how I've made it. So first of all, I've got a frame that I've die cut using the nested scallop dies. I've already gone ahead and die cut that sentiment hugs in white cardstock. I've got a white cardstock panel, which I'm going to ink blend on, and then that's the cover plate die, and I've got a piece of acetate that is just slightly larger than that, so that when I run it through the die cut machine, I'm not going to lose any of the detail. I used this second largest scalloped nested die to cut out the frame, and I've got the outline of the hugs die as well, which I'm going to use later on. So I'm going to use 3 distress oxides to ink blend with. I'm going to use Tattered Rose, Worn Lipstick and Picked Raspberry. And I've got a selection of shaker elements from Crafts. She's got a massive selection of sequins and shaker elements, and I really like to have a few on hand so that I can mix my own shaker mix. So I've got these Funky Fossil blending brushes, which I'm going to use to blend a cardstock panel. The cardstock that I'm using is actually the Craft Stash watercolour cardstock from their creative range. So far I've not been overly impressed with it from a watercolour perspective. However, the inks blend like butter on it. You really get a smooth blend really easily. So I'm still trying out the cardstock, but I'm holding my breath as regards to watercolouring on it. It just doesn't seem to be that great to me. I've got another little panel that I'm just going to do a little bit of blending on as well there, which we're going to use for the shadow die for the hugs sentiment. But first of all, I'm just going to give these a little spritz with some water. And this just gives, again, another little bit of dimension to a relatively straightforward shaker card. So as you can see, the colours lifting slightly there, and it just gives a lovely mottled effect. So I'm going to put those to one side to dry. Now I'm going to bring in my die cutting machine. This is the Sizzix Big Shot, and this is the plate layout that you need in order to use a die with your embossing mat. So I've got the main platform, then I've got one of my plates, then you lay the die face up. I've placed the acetate on top, and then add in the rubber mat and the embossing plate over the top of that, and I'm just going to run that through. And you'll see that the results are really quite stunning. There's so much texture on the acetate. I just really hope the camera really picks that up. But there's so much detail on there, and it really does just step up your shaker cards just that little bit. So next I'm just going to bring in the frame, and I'm just going to show you how the acetate will fit in that frame. I do realise that I haven't given you the measurements yet, and I will give you those later on in the video. But as you can see, there's just a little bit of the lip of the acetate that I do need to trim off. So I'm just going to bring in my Tim Holtz trimmer. This is the larger one, and I'm just going to trim off those excess bits. Now the frame is just over 4 inches by 5.5. And the panel that I've blended on is 4 inches by 5.5. So it'll fit nicely behind the frame. So I'm just going to add some red line tape around the frame now. This is just a really strong adhesive tape, and it's really good for holding acetate in place. And once I've gone around all the edges and trimming it with my scissors, I'm then just going to remove the release tape off the back. Then to attach the acetate, I always find it easier to start from one corner, make sure that's lined up, then do the bottom corner opposite, and then push it down so it's nice and straight as you go. But whatever you find easier to do this, I just find that is the best way to make sure that I get it straight on the panel. And remember, if there is any acetate overhanging off the back, you can always trim that off. So next I'm going to bring in this smaller blended panel, and I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine to cut out the shadow element of the hugs die. And then I'm just going to use some Ranger Multimedia matte glue to attach the hugs sentiment to the shadow outline for that die. I find the matte medium's really good for things like this, because if any does ooze out the side, it dries matte, so you won't really see it. The only thing you do have to be careful with is, obviously we're attaching this to distress oxides, which are water reactive. and so they will react with the glue. So you just want to bear that in mind. You want to make sure that you use the thin amount of glue as possible, really, so that it doesn't activate the ink. So I'm just attaching that panel to a custom card base. The front of my card base measures 4 3/8 by 5 7/8. So if you double that, you get the size card piece that you need in order to create the card base. But of course you can make that a custom size based on whatever die that you use if you attempt this technique. So then I'm just going to add a few of each of the different sequins to the centre of that panel. I do like to create my own shaker mixes like this. I know that you can buy them ready-made, but sometimes it's nice to kind of customise how much of each colour you want to use. So I love the fact that I can just add a few flat sequins, a few normal sequins, and a few of those gorgeous flower sequins as well. And then I'm going to use the foam tape from Crafts. This is the thinner one. I believe it's 5mm. But I will leave links in the description box below, and I'm just going to run that around the edge of the frame. You want to make sure that because it's a shaker card, you want those edges to be as close together as possible. You don't want any sequins escaping from the card when you shake it. So just make sure that you can cut yourself a little bit of extra foam tape just so that you can really push those corners in. So I'm just lining that up, and I'm just going to remove the backing tape now. It's always good to make sure that your sequins are spread out flat a little bit so that you don't get any kind of lumps where they get trapped in the middle. So once I'm happy with that, all that we've got to do now is add our sentiment. So I'm just adding some Ranger Multimedia Matte again to the back of this Hugs die, which I'm going to stick directly onto the acetate in the frame. And then the With Love sentiment, I'm just going to pop up on some foam tape. So I really hope that you've enjoyed seeing this card today. I really hope that you give Embossing Acetate a go. Of course you can emboss acetate with embossing folders, but this just really shows you another way to use those cover plate dies. You haven't just got to die cut with them, you can emboss, and they do emboss acetate. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'll leave some close-up photos at the end of this video, and please don't forget to like and leave a comment if you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more from me, then please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Take care.